Hello and welcome to
Absolute Game Off.
Nerd! I'm JP, that's Rohan, and we're your non-geek, non-nerd hosts, and we're happy to have you guys watching today. We have a special guest. He has the most recognizable voice in the comic community, and essentially he has been the first show I ever listened to get back into comics, so I'm happy to have him on. Rohan, who's our guest for today?
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say same kind of thing. I've told the story many times. When I went back into the comics for the first time, the owner said you can learn a lot about comic books on YouTube. So I looked up some comic book stuff, and one of my first podcasts as well was the Renaissance man himself, Regie Collects. I say Renaissance man because he collects, he sells, he has a channel, he makes comic books, he publishes, does it all. So Regie, thanks for coming on. How you doing?
Oh, it's my pleasure, brother. I just want to circle back to something that JP said. I think you said you are the non-geek, non-nerd host. So what does that make me?
You're another non-geek like us. I mean, if you're a bodybuilder, you can't be a geek. You can't be a nerd, right? So
yeah, you can. I'm no longer a bodybuilder. That was a previous life. Now I'm just somebody's dad. Okay. Yeah. No, it's my pleasure to be on. Thank you guys for the kind words, and my pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, right on. So Reggie, we start every one of our interviews off with the exact same question, and it is, what is your origin story when it relates to comics? We'll take us way back. How did you all get into it?
You know, I wish I had a better memory. Because I don't. I think I was exposed to comics early on by a cousin, maybe some DC related comics, but it really wasn't until middle school that I really got into comics in like the 90s, right? When I was reading Marvel, a ton of Marvel, Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, a bunch of X-Men books. And, the whole Image spinoff, right? And I went and started reading a bunch of Image books and then a bunch of Marvel, and got to high school. And then I met girls, and I was like, "Ooh, this is great," But girls and comics back then didn't go together, right? So
I don't know if they do any still yet. I don't know.
Oh no, they do, brother. Have you been to a Comic-Con lately, sir?
Oh yeah, the cosplay.
I have, but.
So I got away from comics for a long period of time because just life, right? And so many of us have gone down that path for lots of reasons beyond just girls, right? But got away from it until around 2005, 2006. I was living in Waldorf. I was living in Maryland and was buying comics in Waldorf, Maryland. And I saw a comic shop, rolled in there, bought a bunch of books, and was reading for about a year. And then I was out again until around the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018. And this was around the time that my wife looked at me. We were having our second kid, and she's like, "I think you're done with this bodybuilding thing," right? Because it was a hobby. It was something I did that I enjoyed. But bodybuilding is a very selfish activity, right? It's about my food, my water, my workout, my cardio, my this, right? And if you're a family person, you can't have be the first thing that so I stopped bodybuilding, and she was like, you need something to do with your time. Maybe you should start to collect again. So she bought me a collection, and I combined that collection she bought me with my original collection, started watching a bunch of YouTube content, kind of like what you just said. And it was off to the races. It was off to the races again for me. And I've been back into it since the beginning of 2018.
Talk to me about that collection she bought you. How big was it? What did it have in it?
Yeah, it was maybe 12 short boxes. There wasn't anything spectacular in there outside of, for me, a signed copy of Spider-Man #1, the signed by Todd McFarlane. It was the Spider-Man that he did in the 90s, right? It came in a picture frame.
Yeah.
And nothing crazy in the collection, but it was enough to ignite that fire again, right? Because I spent time cataloging those boxes and integrating it with my other collection and realizing there were gaps that I could fill. And I actually sent that copy of Spider-Man 1 signed by Todd to be graded. It came back a 9.8. I still have it because it reminds me of my return to comics courtesy of my wife.
Very cool. I will say, I got to give your wife mad props. I mean, JP and I's wives could not care less about comics. And let's just say if they bought us anything comic related, it'd be like
It
that.
would have been the shirt.
Right? Your wife bought you a whole collection. You know, the fact that she's able to buy, that's impressive.
So let's be clear. My wife doesn't give a hoot about comics. She doesn't give a hoot.
Get you for a few hours a day.
My wife recognizes that I need to channel my energy into something. And if I don't, then I become chaos, right? and she knows that I need something. So the thing was, there are worse vices to have, right? And comics, at least you know where I am, at least you know what I'm doing. I'm in my room, I'm reading a comic. It's pretty much it, right? I don't think she expected me to spend the kind of money I spend, or to have a YouTube channel or a podcast, or move into publishing. I don't think she expected that, but there are worse vices to have.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. How, so again, like obviously with us starting in 2022 collecting, I by no means have seen the content you've created for years prior to that. When I do watch your content, you are constantly referring to the 100K collection. Yeah. Take me from that first 12 short boxes to the 100K, like what happened in between, and then how did you that's like a big growth. So kind of talk to me about that.
Yeah. So she bought that small collection of whatever it was, a dozen boxes or whatever. I had 4 long boxes from basically my childhood and the 2005, 2006 collecting. So I still had all those books from my childhood. But when I came back into the hobby, I dedicate myself to stuff, and I jump into it. If I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And so when I came back into the hobby, I was watching guys like Reaper Tate, ETA Nick, Jim Mint sell my comics. Those were some of the guys that I had breakfast with literally every day, right? And what's funny is I met the sell my comics guys, and I said that to them, and they were like, they thought that was weird. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you, right? Still haven't met Jim Mint. We've been in the same place many times, and we still haven't met. But I started watching the content. I started recognizing that there was a bunch of people out there that were into comics the same way that I was. And I started buying. I started reading. And little by little, I amassed a decent sized collection relatively quickly, as you would imagine. And over the years, I've done, sketchy stuff. I bought comics in Oakland off a street corner. I've bought books behind a 7-Eleven. When I was living in California, 10 o'clock at night behind a 7-Eleven. Just, sketchy stuff, as you do with all collectors do it, right? But I came back in, I just started buying a lot of comics and reading a lot of comics, and I got into graded comics, and started the YouTube channel, and just started having a whole lot of fun. You know what I'm saying? Meeting a lot of really good people and having a lot of great conversations. And what happened is, through the channel, I had a lot of people that would reach out to me, even to this day, that will reach out to me. I just inherited a collection. My significant other, my grandfather, my aunt, my whatever it was, passed away. And I have all these books. I don't know what to do with them. And I give people a lot of advice about catalog it, figure out what you want, figure out what you want to do with it. And that happened with a person that had a very large collection. A family had a very large collection because someone passed away. I gave them a ton of advice. And in the end, they basically said to me, "We want you to buy it." And I was like, "No." And mind you, I had flown up there to see this collection. I had never seen that many comics outside of a comic shop or a con. I had never seen a private collection that large. And then we're talking 10 copies of New Mutants 98. What was in there? Daredevil issue #1, X-Men issue #2, multiple copies of Amazing Spider-Man issue #300. Like, you name the key, it was there, and oftentimes in multiples. 50 copies of Thundercats #1, the original, right? And I said no. And it took about a year of me thinking about it, my wife encouraging me to do it, for me to finally pull the trigger. And I finally pulled the trigger 30,000 pounds of comics is basically what I bought. I had to hire a moving company to pick it up and move it, and it shows up at the storage unit, and I'm like, what did I just do? And like 5 guys unloaded it into the storage bin, and I closed the bin. I ran because I had to go back to work. So I go back to work, but then I come back later that day and I'm like, what did I do? I mean, it's like a 30 by 40. I can't remember. It was a massive, long storage facility. And I'm like, what do I do with this now? But I figured it out clearly, right? So
yeah, I mean, what I was gonna say too about it, what I find crazy is you can watch your videos and you'll be like, oh, this book is getting hot. I'm going to go look at the 100K collection and see if it's there. And it doesn't matter if it's Marvel, DC, Nintendo, Power. Like, you're like, oh, I found 7 copies. Yeah. Here we go. Let's see what we got. And I'm like, and so that to me is its own phenomenon. And then the other phenomenon is, I mean, have you still to this day gone through all 100K comics, or is it still like a discovery process that you could go and have anytime you go into your garage?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag to answer the question, right? So it's too, in my opinion, because I have a lot of responsibilities, I can't catalog the daggone thing, right? It's a lot of books. I can't catalog that. I got to live. So I have a general sense of what's in there, right? I go through it. I outline on the front of the box the titles that are in there. I don't know every single issue, but I generally know a title. And I've kind of grouped it where it's like X-Men over here, mutants over here, Green Lantern over here, Superman here, Batman related titles over there. So it's kind of grouped that way. And then on some of the boxes, I know it's like number whatever through whatever, right? So I have a general sense. But as you all know, books that were not on anyone's radar will suddenly get hot because of something. Yep. And you're like, do I have it? Then it's that thing of me getting up from this chair and walking down the stairs to discover that I do or I don't. And that's the fun of it still for me, is I don't know what's in there exactly to the book,
Now, do you buy any new books? Because you have a whole 100,000 to go through to see if you got it or not.
I do. I do still have a regular pull list. It's relatively small, right? It's a relatively small pull list. But yeah, I still buy new books. I still buy old books. I mean, heck, the Jimmy Powell, that Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen's brand new. Many of these back here, that bottom row, except for the Superman, all came from the 100K collection.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you recently had a video where you got a copy of Tech 359. And it was you saying, I got this for this price. I was like, oh, this is now at a price range. I want to go. And then it popped up and I traded for it, like literally within weeks of your video coming up. So,
yeah. So the bottom row came pretty much from the top, from the collection, the top row, except for that one. That one also came from the 100K. The others I had to buy. But yeah, what's funny about that video and about what you just said is early on, I never disclosed price because talking about money makes me uncomfortable. But over time of creating enough videos and having enough conversations, I now disclose price. I'm more comfortable with talking about that. But sometimes with money, you mention a number and people will think you're stupid. Some will think you're lying. And some will just be like, I don't have that kind of money to spend it all. So it's tough to mention money,
Yeah, I mean, we feel, not necessarily JP, but like we have a good buddy, Mike, who has Lunch Money Comics. And he constantly tells us, he's like, I do these videos and I get the comics and I get them 50% off or whatever it is. And there's always still someone being in his comments like, you paid way too much for those. Or
it's impossible. No matter what you say, somebody, if dependent upon the size of your audience, will agree, disagree, think you're stupid, think you're brilliant, whatever it is, right? And it's just par for the course, I think, of creating content,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, especially when you have a large following, there's just bound to be some bad seeds in there. You just gotta ignore them and
they seem to be the loudest too.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure. Now, I was going to ask you, your back row, I've seen it change numerous times. So yeah. Is there a specific, how do you determine what goes on the backboard? And does it matter the time of year, the like what's hot? Like, DC, Marvel, whatever it may be? Is there something that determines that?
It depends. You know, sometimes I'll try to display my most recent project, right? So at one point I had a bunch of the early image books back there because I was buying a bunch of image books, as I kind of alluded to, you know.
Is that what you want? You were trying to get that. You were trying to get all the image 9.8s, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there's one that's out there still that I don't have. And somebody wants a stupid amount of money for it, so I can't do it. But yeah, so what inspires the back wall might be a project that I'm working on. It might be inspired by something I'm reading. It might be inspired by the time of the year or me. Sometimes I'll put a poll up and I'll say, what do you guys want to see? Right. And I'll do that. But the goal of the back wall is there's a couple of things. Part of it is me trying to enjoy my collection by putting on display books from my collection versus just having them in the bins here in the room. Yep. Part of it is because I create so much content, I want people to see something different versus just my face or the same books all the time. So there's a method to the madness, right? Of what goes back there, but it's just me having fun. That's it.
In that room that you're in, is there displays elsewhere, or is it just that behind you?
So that is a fake wall. That is not a real wall. In this room, all the walls are angle.
Oh, so you're in like the attic almost.
Yeah. It's a. I think this was an attic that was turned into a room by one of the previous owners. But all of the walls generally here are all slanted except for like my work area where I have some whiteboards up. So this is the only area where there is actually a display. The other walls off to my side and in front of me and above me, honestly, are soundproofing to keep my voice in when I'm doing audio, and off to the sides of me are soundproofing to keep the voice in as well. So yeah,
interesting.
Yeah. I do a tour. I've done a couple of videos where I show like behind the scenes of like what it looks like in here. But yeah, I built that wall in my garage.
I think now that you say that, I do think I remember, because I distinctly remember a scene of you being like, that's the box where if the house is on fire, I grab that box.
Yeah,
that's the Oh Sugar box.
Yeah.
That's the and sugar is not sugar, right? Yeah. But it's I have Oh Sugar 1 and Oh Sugar 2. So if something goes wrong, those are the two that I'll grab. So
yeah.
And for those that don't know, so what it is if stuff goes bad and my family is safe, those are the two bins that I will try to grab if there is time. That's
wait, does either Sugar 1 or Sugar 2 end up on the back wall?
Yeah, Sugar 1 and Sugar 2 do rotate out. I don't think anything on that back wall is Sugar 1 or Sugar 2. If that tells you anything.
Yeah, at the moment. I mean, I do recall a back wall of like Hulk 1, X-Men 1, I mean, that was my ideal wall.
That's Sugar 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Was that in the 100,000 collection?
No. So in the 100K collection, the big books that were in there were X-Men 2, Daredevil 1. Yeah, those were the only Oh Sugar books that were in the 100K collection. Yeah. But I will tell you, there were ample books in the 100K collection that put me in a position to buy books for the Oh Sugar box, right? Yeah. Like selling stuff off put me in a position to be able to buy those books.
Let me ask a quick question. I don't think I've ever seen you talk much about or have like Golden Age books. Is that not something that interests you?
So I have one Golden Age books that I bought from a member of the community that was having some financial difficulties. I bought the book from him. It's honestly not even a book I'm really interested in. But again, if you say you're a member of the community and someone's struggling and you can help, you try to help, right? So I bought the book. But so there are, with my collection, I have specific goals that I set for myself. And the goal that I've set for my collection is to build the best Silver Age collection that I possibly could. And that first was Marvel. And now that I've purchased many of the Marvel books that I really treasure, I've turned my attention to DC. And at some point, I may turn my attention to Golden Age books. Specifically, it is the Human Torch books that I love. Human Torch versus Submariner, the Schomburg books. Those are fantastic, but those are also big dollar books, right? With those books, I don't enjoy reading them as much as I do Silver Age. Like, I like reading Silver Age books, as campy as it may be, as corny as it may be. I still enjoy that read. Golden Age reading is very different, in my opinion. And so I still like to buy things that I want to read and that I enjoy reading. So at some point I'll get around to Golden Age, but for right now, it's still very much Silver Age comics.
On the Marvel side of things, in that pursuit, do you think you would then, you know, when you finish DC, is there any thought of like, well, maybe I'll actually try and now upgrade the Marvel Silver Age, or do you think it'll be to the Golden Age?
I'm honestly evaluating that now, to be honest with you, right? Because the market is down, because of the controversies that exist in the hobby. Now is not necessarily a bad time to upgrade. Like, I've been staring very hard at an Amazing Spider-Man 129. That's not, you know, that's a book that I already own, but I've seen nice copies for not a crazy amount of money. And so, you know, I've been looking at that. I've been looking, of course, at Amazing Fantasy 15. Like, can I upgrade that? Right. The thing that I try to do is to not pull money from family funds, but to allow the hobby to fund itself. So now is not a great time to sell, but it's a great time to buy. And that's the mixed bag of it, right?
It is. It's almost like the housing market in California. Everything went up in value, but then you had to buy the similar, you know, pay for that upgraded house. So, you know, you could have sold yours, but now you're paying a lot more. Now we're in this market where everything's coming down, and you can buy something, but can you sell yours?
There you go.
Can you? You probably can if you undercut it, and hopefully you bought it for a lot less to make it worth it. So,
but that's the rub, right? And so everybody loves lower prices, but you have to sell sometimes. I mean, unless you take money from other things, unless you don't have a family, right? And I have a family that likes really nice stuff, unfortunately. I wish they did. I wish they did.
Well, I imagine
kids. I know what you mean. I got 4 kids.
I was also going to say, I imagine the wife that says buy the 100K collection's also like, hey, guess what I like? So,
well, the good thing is that the 100K collection funded itself. I mean, you know, like, I use comic book funds to fund it, you know, and that's why she doesn't care about what I do, because I never take food off the table or things from them to do the stuff that happens in this room. And that's why she does not care, you know, but you still have to be responsible about what you're doing. It still has to make sense and, you know, stuff like that. So,
I mean, the only thing when you start the collection, you needed seed money, right? It came from something, and then that blossomed into what you're talking about now. YouTube funds. Yep.
Yeah. My channel started with an old iPad and a light that my wife used for photo shoots. That's where the channel started. And I did not spend any money on it until like I got monetized and started making that whole like $10. And I was like, ooh, I can get 2 lights with this, you know?
Real quick, before we start talking about the channel, I just want to ask, going back to the collecting side, with all of these books, of these goals, the 100K, is there a title or two or character two that is still like, this is my main love?
Spider-Man.
Nice.
Spider-Man's still the jam. And then I would say, just generally speaking, mutants is the other, specifically X-Men, right? Those have been my love from the beginning, you know. And
you said you were buying Image in middle school, so you're essentially the same generation as a 90s kid then, right?
Pretty much.
So I think that's kind of what we all fall like. Spider-Man, X-Men.
In your 40s.
Yeah, I'm in my 40s. Yeah, and I mean, though that was the hotness, but for me, it was X-Terminators, Fallen Angels, it was Cloak and Dagger, right? So it wasn't just Spider-Man proper or X-Men proper. It was the adjacent things as well. You know what I'm saying? Spider-Man crossed over to everybody. And as a result of that, Night Thrasher. I dig Night Thrasher.
I did love Night Thrasher.
Right. Cardiac. I like Cardiac. As a result, I got introduced to Deathlock as a result of Spider-Man, right? And I remember back in the 90s, Cameron Hodge was the villain. Cameron Hodge was the villain for the X-Men, right? But it's like, I read X Factor. I read Fallen Angels, X Terminators, anything that was adjacent to mutants, X-Men, I was in there, you know?
Now, were you a collector of the artist or just the story or the character? Because the 90s had Jim Lee and McFarlane, so.
Yeah, I was maybe a bigger fan of the characters. And for me as a writer, I always enjoyed the story, right? But there are certain artists that I appreciate more so than others, but I was never like mesmerized by the art, right? Like Jim Lee is my X-Men artist, right? And Bagley is my Spider-Man artist. I appreciate the others, but that's it right there, right? Those two for me are special. But I was never really that person that committed the writer or the artist's name to memory. I never got a book because of an artist or a writer. I never really bought a comic because of the cover, because so-and-so did it. That wasn't really my jam. But the characters, I really just enjoy.
Yeah.
Nice.
So then when you did start with the iPad and the light from your wife, what year was that? Like how long ago are we talking about?
It's 2018.
2018.
I think it was maybe February 2018. I want to say.
And what prompted you to, or inspired you to do this?
Reaper Tate, ETA Nick, Jim Mint, Sell My Comics. I would watch those guys, and they were having a lot of fun. They were having a lot of fun opening comics, talking about comics. I was like, I want to do that, right? Because, you know, growing up, I didn't have a ton of friends that were into comics. I had a couple of buddies, right? 2005, 2006, when I was buying, I was married by this point. I was in my 20s, and I didn't have any friends that were in comics, you know? And so I'm watching these guys, and they're having fun. And I'm like, I was living in California. We had one kid. I still don't have any friends that are in comics. I'm like, I'm gonna start a YouTube channel. And I did it. And I met a lot of really great people, some of which I am still friends with to this day.
Nice.
Now, do you get around to a lot of the shows in your neck?
Finish your question. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say you don't go to, you're not out at any shows like near you or travel to any of them.
I'm not a con person. You know, I've been to Heroes Con. I've been to the Concord Con up in because I'm in North Carolina now. I'm no longer in Cali. But I tend to, if you go to a con, you're going to spend money.
Right.
And if I'm not in a money spending mood, or if I don't have my eyes on something, then I'm not going to go, right? Because I don't like lines, and I don't like crowds, right? So, but if I have a purpose for going, because I'm supposed to meet somebody's in town, they're like, hey, do you want to come hang out? I'm going to be at a booth, I'm going to do a signing, then I'll show up for that kind of stuff. But just deciding I'm going to go to a con. My kids are playing flag football and soccer, and they do Girl Scouts and dance and this and that and the other. So it's like we're running from game to game most weekends, you know?
Yeah.
Because we have two, not four. Yeah. I heard you say, JP.
Yeah, he's got four. I got three. I had twins on the second round, so that was With the channel, you've obviously made tons of content. Is there a specific type of video that you enjoy making the most?
The ones that make people smarter about the hobby, right? Because when I came back into the hobby in 2017, 2018, I realized that the hobby had changed a lot from when I was in it originally, and even when I revisited in 2005, 2006. So a lot of what I knew and understood was antiquated. And so I consumed a lot of content to try to get myself up to speed on the hobby, you know? And so I've dedicated the channel by and large to creating content that makes people smarter about the hobby. I don't tell them what to do, but I say, hey, here's some stuff that I messed up on. Don't mess up on this. Or here's some stuff that I observed that you may want to know about, right? So so much of it is about helping the community a little bit. Like I make a ton of content, but that is the core, is helping people be smarter about the hobby.
Got it. No, I like that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So taking this further then, right? We had Doug Bratton on, we had Scott on it, which were awesome. I love those conversations. That's your publishing company. So take us to that next evolution when you're like, I want to start making my own comics.
Yeah. So what happened was that I was creating a ton of content, and I met a lot of people through the channel as a result, right? Live streams, people reach out to you, they DM you on social media, you start to talk to them. And I met a guy, Doug Bratton. He was just a subscriber. And he was like, hey, I want to write some content for your blog. So I was like, okay, I'm not paying you. I don't have any money. So he started writing blog content. And I think for like a year, he just gave me really great articles that we put up on the blog post. And we started to create some content from some of the blog posts that he wrote. And after a little while, he pitched me this idea of writing a guide for comics. And we called it the Guide to Smart Comic Collecting. And basically what we did is we took videos that I created and blog posts that he wrote, and we expanded them and we turned it into a book. So same content, we just rejiggered it and wrote it and had it edited and had it laid out by Scott. And we put it out as a book, and we sold 4,200 copies of that. And again, trying to make people smarter about the hobby. So we did volume 1, we did volume 2, and then Doug was like, hey, got an idea for a comic. Are you interested? And he sent me the script. We looked at it, we talked about it, we did a contract, and we kicked off Swolger Publishing. And the very first comic that I released was Isolation. And we've done issues 1 through 4. We've sold about 11,000 copies of Isolation. And that then segued into Scott, who was our graphic artist, saying, hey, I've got an idea for a comic. It's like, all right, let's do it. So that's how Swolger Publishing came to be. It was literally a guy that I met through the channel, and just having a wonderful work ethic and a great mind, and us hitting it off.
Yeah. Can I ask, is Swolger kind of an ode to the bodybuilding days? Okay.
Yeah. So Swolger actually came about with the 100K collection. So I'm at the storage facility where the collection is located, and it's wintertime, and I'm in there huffing and puffing because it's 400 long boxes, 400 plus long boxes, and I'm moving boxes, and I'm huffing and puffing in the storage unit. And I was like, man, you got to be in shape to do this. And so it just kind of evolved. And at the time, I was also like maybe 210 pounds full of muscle. Like I was pretty big. And I was like, we're going to call this Swolger. So I started talking about comic book Swolger, started making t-shirts, comic book Swolgers. And then we decided to do the publishing thing. And I was like, what do I call it? Swolger Publishing. And that's how that all came about, you know? Nice. Very organic, like the Gibbon Gang. Very organic.
I was going to ask that next about the Gibbon Gang, where that came from.
So it was very organic. I was doing a video because I think I was at the time working on my run of Amazing Spider-Man, right? Issues 1 through present day, right? And I had just purchased Amazing Spider-Man issue number 110. And I think I was either doing a live stream or pre-recorded video, and I just made this offhanded comment about what's a Gibbon anyway, right? Because Marvel's next greatest superhero. And I'm like, what's a Gibbon anyway, right? And then people started to comment like a Gibbon is an inferior ape or a lesser ape. Like they started like giving me like, you know, these serious responses to a silly comment. And then I started to have internet challenges in California. And people started to joke that it was the Gibbon that was messing with my internet. And it just became
like a gremlin. Yeah.
It became this thing. And it was not something I embraced initially. You know, I was like, Gibbons throw poop, monkeys throw poop. I don't want to, you know, but people around the channel were having fun with it. And I was like, you know what? We're just going to lean into it. We are the Gibbon Gang. And so to be a member of the Gimmick Gang, you have to own a copy of Amazing Spider-Man issue number 110. And as a result of that, we inadvertently spiked the price of Amazing Spider-Man 110. It spiked up 1 week like 300%. And that actually scared me, because it was like, to the comment, Rohan, that you made earlier about things that we say, people listen to it and they take action. That scared me, that I could say something and people would do, and then it would show up in the market. Like, that's a lot of influence, you know? And that's when I realized that I have to be careful about what I say and how I do things, you know?
Yeah.
I almost bought that Spider-Man 110 numerous times. I'm like, that's the given one. I got to get it. Reggie said we got to get this one. I know exactly what that is.
It's a cool book, man. Yeah. I at one point I had like 11 or 12 copies. I would never buy them online because of what I just mentioned.
You just find them.
I would find them and buy them, or honestly, even some dealers would just see me at a con, like I'd be somewhere, and they just give it to me. The Bunky brothers, like, they would just give me copies. Here, take it, right? Because they knew, right? But yeah, I don't buy them online for fear of that kind of stuff, you know. And if you know, I try to be very careful about the things that I do, because I want to try to avoid conflicts and people being able to say you did this or you did that. And I'm like, no, I didn't do that. I didn't take from your channel because I don't watch your channel, right? Like, it's you have to be careful about that stuff, because it's interesting how the internet can be.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've noticed when I got back into collecting, and it was 2022, and looking for content, I was listening to podcasts, and you had, you know, that yours was the first podcast I listened to. Sound like Casey Kasem. You even mentioned that a couple times on your podcast. I was like, this guy has the, you know, great radio voice. But you're not as much on podcasts anymore, as you're doing more shorts recently, correct?
Yeah.
Any reason for that change?
So a couple of reasons. You know, my brother was working for me at the time. I started having family members do things for me, you know, and my brother was doing some stuff for me because he was in a place where he needed a little bit of help. So he was doing my podcast for me. He would take the video and convert it to audio and put some stuff on it, right? And we used to put that out. But as his situation changed, I had to refocus and realize that continuing to put out the audio for, you know, whatever the viewership was or the listenership was, the balance wasn't there, right? Unlike a short that I can do in 30 seconds or a minute and have that be consumed by thousands of people. And we've had some shorts that have been viewed by 1 million folks that I just put out there, and it does its thing. So short form content has been a way for me to put out content about news events a lot faster, right? So it allows me to share information with the community in a way that I can't do as quickly with even a formal live stream or pre-recorded video or a podcast. I can cover things in minutes. I can read a couple of articles. I can think about what I want to say. I can record it, and editing is a couple of minutes, done. Right. So it's just diversification of the content.
No, I've noticed you had the most recent one was the Elon Musk and Gina. Carano, right?
Yeah.
Saw that one. So yeah. So I mean, I was because I walk my dog every morning, you know, and I listen to your podcast, and now with the spec and the Marvel output being dwindling, there are much less podcasts that actually go into the speculation of comics, which is not that you did that, but I could at least learn about the hobby.
Yeah.
When I was from you, you know, and from, you know, Gem Mint, Comic Tom, those guys, you can listen and I could absorb it that way. Now it's all basically become, you know, coupled conversations about, you know, rumors. You know, at that time in 2022, there was something dropping almost all the time.
Yep. So, but it's like, you know, I think that to some degree or another, you know, the decoupling of the speculation market from the movies is kind of sort of a good thing. You know what I'm saying? That 2020, 2021, 2022 was like this perfect storm. It's just this huge explosion. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, having diverse content allows you to still put out stuff for people to be able to consume, right? And right now, for me, covering the news events, just keeping people in the loop as to what's happening, I think people appreciate that, right? And at some point, maybe the podcast will come back. And the other thing I will say to you is YouTube actually converts some of my videos into podcasts. So like the Comics Today show that I do on Wednesdays, they actually turn that into a podcast, but it's not on a podcast platform. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I don't even know how to access it, but it's always it's somewhere on YouTube as a podcast, you know? We gotta ask somebody younger than me to help figure it out, because I don't know where it is, you know?
Yeah. Going back real quick to the publishing thing.
Yeah.
When you started with the book and then the comics, what was the learning curve like to get into the publishing industry for you?
Steep.
Yeah.
Steep. You know, dealing with creative types is always a challenge, right? Because you know, what you're trying to do is you're trying to take the written word and turn it into a visual thing, and this blend between the visual and the written. You know what I'm saying? And you're trying to tell this story while working with very creative people that have amazing talent that you don't possess, right? So you've got to take the wonderful written story and turn it into this mixed media kind of thing that tells a story, right? With good pacing and in a tight package in terms of number of pages. But then you've got to figure out the bleeds and how to do your copyright information, and what kind of paperweight are you going to use, and are you going to get UV coating on it, and you know, what's the weight of the paper, and how do you want people to feel it, and what's the binding time, and what's the lead time to get this thing printed and shipped, and you got to deal with damages. It's complicated, right? And what I've learned is that it's easy to make a book, and I say easy, air quotes, easy to make a book. Much harder to sell that daggone book, right? Because then you gotta distribute it, you've got to ship it, you've got to market it, you've got to get it out to people, and you've got to have a rhythm to it so that people that you expose it to are getting the next issue or the issue after that relatively quickly. So it's all a learning lesson, and a fun one, but it's tough.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversations with Doug and Scott we had, because I've never had any insight onto how a book, and like that whole like collaboration of like, I'm writing, you're drawing, and then like even Scott, he kind of filled me in on the letterer you guys use, and I was like, explain to me lettering, because I don't know, I always see letterer in the credits, but I don't really understand. And then like he was telling me about how like, no, like she formulates like where the bubbles go, and I was like, oh,
it's an art. It's an art in and of itself. Right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If your artist doesn't draw the panels the right way, then it creates a challenge for your letterer, which means that your writer has a challenge.
Yeah.
Especially if your writer has a lot of words that they need to convey in order to communicate. So it's like, it's this, your team has to gel, right? And so one of the ways that we accelerated that gelling process is we only hired creators from the Kubert School, right? And part of the reason for that is Doug is up the street from the Kubert School.
Yeah, he told us, his whole connection to the Kubert School. Yeah.
And by hiring people from the Kubert School, you know that they understand how to draw, how to meet deadlines, right? How to collaborate with other people. And because they're all from the same system, they understand how to communicate with one another.
Yeah, they're all using the same process. Yeah.
They're using the same process. And all you have to do is to figure out how to insert your writer into that and allow your writer to drive the creative process. And even he or she, in my case, he has to know where to push and pull with the artist, with the letterer, with the inker, if we happen to have an inker, right? It's very much collaborative.
Is there a, or go ahead, JP.
I was just say, who's sort of steering the ship when it comes to the comic book? Is it, you're not artist focused, not against the artist on that, but Is it more about the writing is what's steering the ship, or is it?
It's a collaborative effort. It really is. So Doug and Scott would write a script, and we would oftentimes go back and forth on the script, right? Like, what is it saying? I find this confusing. I don't get this, right? You need to streamline this, clean this up, right? I'm lost in this story, right? Because ultimately you've got to be able to give that script to an artist, and that artist has to see it the same way as the writer. Right? They've got to be able to see it in their mind, but then they also have to be able to tell the story visually. So what parts can be visual versus that have to be written or narrated? What part is dialogue, right? So there's this, and I can tell you for a fact, like for example, with Marcus, which is the second title we released through Scott, we did the script. He and I think Scott wrote it 5 different drafts before we even got an artist involved. The artist read it, Chase Cowan, super talented guy from the Kubert School. He read it and he was like, I don't know about this ending. So he then brainstormed with Scott an alternative epilogue ending that I think made the story come together a lot better. And even after they collaborated and kind of figured it out, when he went to go draw it, he modified it even more. But so your writer can't be so, it's got to be this way, that they can't be open to the visual artist saying, well, how about this? If we draw it this way, we can communicate the same thing, maybe with less words or with more impact or more emphasis. So it's very much a collaborative thing, but the writer ultimately is guiding the ship, but not so much so that they're not being receptive to other people's input. It's collaboration.
Gotcha.
And this is all, as we were talking about, this is all now happening because you're in North Carolina. Scott, I remember, is in Pennsylvania. So you're essentially like we're doing a podcast
is he North Carolina too?
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, like, you guys are spending your time when you're doing this, like we are right now, and like that to me, I feel like, you know, I think back in the day with Marvel in the 60s or whatever, like they're all there in the same room, and you know, maybe that makes, but like it seems like there's a whole nother aspect to it when your eyes are all online, and like, because how does Chase, you know, show his while he's drawing, and then like it's, you know, it's just, it's a lot of angles.
So the way that it works, honestly, is that there's the written story, and then we have Doug and Scott would have calls with the writers or with the artists. Let's talk about it. What do you see? Where are the pitfalls? Where are the challenges? What don't you understand? They would tweak it, but then your penciler then goes off and does thumbnails where they draw little small versions of it. Does this make sense? Oh, well, let's erase that. Let's redo it. Right. So it doesn't just go from the written word to that beautiful art. There's some in-between steps there where they're like drawing and redrawing thumbnails to get it right before they're like, yes, that's it. Draw that in more detail. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the benefit is that we can, while we're not in the same place, we can have calls like this. Like we literally did stuff like this and we would talk through it. And then because Doug is down the street from the Kubert School and some of the artists were in the same area, he would meet them for coffee and they would go through it. Right. But technology can be a wonderful thing, you know?
Oh yeah.
But we successfully put out a handful of books that I think were pretty well received by people. So I'm thankful for that.
Obviously there's a learning curve. Have you found, like, what are the time, like issue 1 took 8 months, issue 2 took 5 months, issue 3, you know, and now we're like, okay, now we can do this in 90 days, or what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, we had to make a couple of pivots because the artist that started working on the book for us actually painted her pages. She sketched them lightly, but then painted them. And she would oftentimes spend 3 days on a single page painting it after it's been thumbnailed. So 3 days times 32 pages plus all of the back and forth. We learned that painting probably isn't the way we want to go for this book, right? The first book took us a while. Right. But that wasn't really a concern. It was 1 to 2 that became the issue because of the painting time. Right. So what we pivoted to was it being partially painted and partially drawn by 2 different artists. And then we segue into just going back more to traditional pencils and having the person that did the painting continue to do our covers. So there was consistency of all of the covers there with the same artist, at least A covers. And we were faster with the pencil because we could do those in like a day versus 3 days or more, just because, you know, artists are artists. They take their time. They want to perfect it. They want to get it right, you know? So, but that's kind of how we evolved, is more to traditional pencil on paper.
And what are kind of your long-term goals with Swolger Publishing?
Still trying to figure it out, man. What we were doing was we were trying to get a couple of publishers to pick it up and to see if they would be interested in putting it out for us, and that didn't work for us. We approached Diamond to try to see if Diamond would distribute it for us. Now that we had, you know, 120 pages of content, whether they would distribute it for us, that didn't work out for us. We approached a graphic novel company to see if they would take the collected and do a collected work, right? I've got 20 pages, multiple covers. Can we put that out? That didn't work for us. So I'm trying to figure out what the next steps will be for us.
Now, when you said
go ahead.
I was gonna say, when you said it didn't work, did that mean just the numbers didn't work with what they were looking to do, or they couldn't fit into what you wanted to do? What was not, you don't have to get into huge details, but just curious what had caused that not to work out.
Yeah. So in the case of Diamond, Diamond was like, you only have 1 title. And then, you know, technically we had, then as we were going through the process, we had 2, but we still had 2 titles. It wasn't 10 titles, 20 titles that they could distribute and make good money off of. It was 1 or 2 that wasn't substantive enough for them. With the larger publishers, I just don't think that they wanted to take a risk on something that was unproven, you know, coming from some unproven folks, right? Versus putting out something that, you know, James Tyan is trying to do, or, you know, one of these more established writers and artist teams that want to put out stuff. There was just no receptivity to what we were doing, but we were constantly encouraged to not stop, which I think that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
But we just could not find a footing that where somebody was interested in moving forward with us doing what we were doing.
So I like the graphic novel side of it. I think that'd be pretty neat to put all that. That's the best way to consume, I think, you know, larger stories.
Don't disagree. Don't disagree. And the goal for us, and again, the goals have evolved as we would do something, we would have an idea for what we were doing. We would hit a roadblock and we're okay, well, how about this? Right. So we've pivoted multiple times. We've even, you know, debated, do we put out a collected work of issues 1 through 4 ourselves? And we do it as, what is that thing? Kickstarter, do it as like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo. We put it out that way. We've debated that. Doug is in the process of trying to see whether he can, let me back up. Isolation is technically a novel. It started out as a novel that we then chapterized into a comic. Because of what I just outlined for you there, Doug is exploring the possibility of getting the novel published, but that too takes time. So, you know, we're trying these different things to see what avenues may be available to us, you know, but along the way, we've given some really talented artists an opportunity to showcase their work. Our books are the first comics that have been published by some really talented people. Yeah. Doug has been able to publish his first comic, A Lifelong Dream. Scott able to publish his first comic, A Lifelong Dream. How many of us that read comics were like, I want to make a comic, right?
Oh, yeah. I remember I drew them back then. Yeah.
We actually did it. And if nothing comes out of this, I'm proud of the things that I just said a second ago.
Yeah, and we talked to Scott. I really liked his QR code concept. I thought that was awesome.
It was genius.
Yeah.
with the soundtrack, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah,
man.
it's great. It was yeah, I absolutely love that. So since you mentioned Kickstarter for the collective, when you first started Swolder, did you self-fund or did you do a Kickstarter for that, or did you get investors or self put together?
Everything funds itself. So I can't remember specifically what led into it, but I was doing these supply boxes, right? Like I didn't want to do mystery boxes. I would do supply boxes in which there would be bags and boards or these mounts to hang your comics on the wall, put together these supply kits because supplies at one point during the pandemic were in short supply. So I was like, hey, I'll do supply boxes. I'll hook people up. I'll sell them. I'll make some money. So I do these projects and I use those funds to fund the next thing. So, you know, we use the funds from the guide, for example, to fund the comic. And to fund the guide, I probably sold some books and I used Patreon money and I used YouTube channel money and I had sponsorship. That's what everything funds the next thing, you know? And again, it started from the free stuff that I had, right?
Going back to your back wall, that is a goal there to then have one row of Marcus, one row of Isolation behind you one day?
I technically have that now. Because
because of the various covers, probably then, right?
Because of the various covers, yeah. So I can do it. And what's cool is I've done some signed books with Scott and with Doug and with Delia, you know. So I have a couple of signed books of the various covers that have been done by the team, but I have enough to fill the wall up. I think I have enough, you know.
Nice.
Because I think the first issue, we may have had like 14 covers. when you add it all up, you know, because we had a couple of exclusives. Tom did a couple of covers, so I think I have enough to maybe fill up that back wall between the two titles.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So, collector, seller, content creator, publisher. What still is your favorite of the passions? Like, what is still like, this is home. This is where I
collector.
Love this. Yeah.
Collector. I'm still a collector, you know. I think as a content creator, people maybe see you as in a different way, but at the end of the day, I'm still just a collector that buys comics, reads comics, and enjoys comics. And I just happen to put out content too, right? But I'm still a collector. I still get excited about hunting a comic and adding it to the collection. I have Blue Marvel issue number 5 over here that just came in. Not a 9.8. I can only get a 9.6, but I'm excited about that. You know, I'm excited to get that up on the wall with the rest of them. So that's still my passion, you know?
Yeah. I find it interesting, or as I say, how kind of one also feeds the other, right? Like I started collecting, and if that had just stayed at collecting, as I said before, like I probably could have burned out, you know, fairly quickly. But then I met JP and I met other people in the community, and that like further involved me. And then we started our channel, and like, you know, and it also makes it nice because I can enjoy the hobby without necessarily having to get a new comic book every day, every week, because I have all these other areas. And so it's like, it's only like built upon itself. So yeah, I imagine it's the same kind of thing for you too.
And I wax and wane through it, right? You know, sometimes I'm super passionate about creating content and I won't be reading as much, and then I'll get back to reading, and it's ways to stay involved in the hobby. And I'll be honest, part of the reason why I originally evolved my content from just doing unboxings is because I realized I couldn't keep spending money the way that I was. Right? Like in 2018, man, I was buying everything. I'm unboxing every video, right? And before you know it, you're like, ooh, I'm running a little low on these funds, right? So it became this thing of, well, if I want to keep putting out content because I enjoy it, what else can I do? And that's when I started to experiment with things, but I came up eventually with the idea of putting out content to help people new to the hobby and newly returning to the hobby. And that allowed me to create a wide set of content that went beyond unboxing, right? Because if you remember, at a period, I mean, you guys came in 2022, but at a point, every video was about unboxing, and every video was the same because we were all unboxing the same books. And I was like, this is boring. We've got to do something else, right? how many copies of Amazing Spider-Man 300 can you see before you're like, just another one, right? But JP, you were about to ask a question there, brother.
Well, no, going back to that, like you must have hit the perfect storm with everybody. We entered the hobby in 2022, but a lot of people came in COVID time and re-entered it, and that content just hit at that time to really people trying to understand the hobby, because we grew up in the 90s, like we talked about, the image books, and watched that boom and bust. And then I got out of it, like you said, girls, school, whatever. And then I got back into it in 2022, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start at. And listen to your content helped that out. That's just what I needed at the time. So perfect storm. So I'm glad that, that was out there.
It was a perfect storm. It really was. But had I not started in 2018, I wouldn't have been ready for 2020.
Yep.
Right. Because they say make a whole lot of bad videos before you start to make some good videos. Right. I look at I don't even look at my old stuff. I think about my old stuff and I'm like, ooh, that was bad, but it was a perfect storm. And at the time I started to create a lot more content like Marvel. I was pumping content out. I was doing a lot more live streams. I was doing a lot more pre-recorded videos because people were at home, as was I. So it's like, well, what else are we going to do? We might as well talk to each other, So I put out a lot of content during that time,
I just can't believe that, Rohan, you and I don't know. I was like redoing stuff in my house. I have no idea why I sold Star Wars stuff to some people, not realizing that the boom was happening. And I missed out on the comic thing. Luckily, I think just because we would have overbought at the time, because we would have been brand new, and just started buying. Whereas had we been a couple years prior, we might not have, bought some of that stuff. But my other question was going back with, you talked about hunting. Where do you hunt for your comics at?
I don't hunt as much anymore.
I mean, you got 100,000 go.
You gotta say his garage is where he's hunting.
I go downstairs.
I'd be there every day going through I just love going through long boxes.
It's fun.
Love it.
So there was a period though before I bought the 100K collection where I was out hunting a lot, right? Like I am on Craigslist. I'm on Facebook Marketplace. I'm stopping at every antique store and what are those things? Pawn shops. I am everywhere, right? I'm in people's basements, going through bins, trying to find comics, right? So, and I was going to a lot of comic shops at the time. I was in California, so California has a lot of really amazing comic shops. I will tell you that. A lot of great back issue locations. So I was out a lot, and there's a lot of videos. I generally say to people, if there's a topic you're interested in, search YouTube for Regie Collects plus that term, whatever that term is. And if you search for Regie Collects hunting, you will find me doing hunting videos where I'm walking into the comic shop and I'm going through the bins looking for stuff,
Oh, nice.
But I used to be out there hardcore. I have less free time now because my kids are a little older. We have a lot of the sports activities, and then I have 100,000 books in the garage. So I kind of just go down there,
Yeah. I have no long or comic shops near me, probably within maybe 20 minutes. And most of my hunting has been done in antique stores.
Yep.
So a friend of mine, I mean, there's I found all kind of neat stuff in these antique stores. I've been to probably 100 antique stores up and down the coast. I go to Outer Banks, so I've been from Pittsburgh all the way down. I've been to an antique store in Long Beach, California, a couple of them on a trip. But a friend of mine just bought the local antique store, and he probably has 60 long boxes. And literally, I don't care if he gives me half off the books. Just to go through those long boxes has been a blast.
Fun times ahead, brother. Yeah. When you separate them and they go, shh.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Because they're so sticky. Whew.
So the sound, the smell, all that goes with it, right?
So to this day, I kick myself because in the 2000s, as I mentioned, I was living in Maryland. I went to an antique shop, and I wasn't buying comics at the time, but I was at an antique shop, and this guy that owned it, he was showing me around, and we go to this back barn, and in this back barn, there was basically a pile of long boxes, just like thrown on top of one another, not stacked, like thrown on top of one another. And he says to me, we own some property and it was a comic shop in there, and the guy stopped paying his rent. So we just cleaned it all out. and I never went into those long boxes. So to this day, I think about that antique store and those boxes in that back bin, because who the heck knows what was in there? I kick myself over that, you know?
Yep, 100%. The antique store that just got bought up by my friend, the guy who owned it prior to that, I knew he had a basement full of long boxes, and I tried to get close enough to him that he would let me to go down there, right? Yep. And then he finally just gave up and sold it, and I found out who bought it, and I got to see what was down there. And we're probably halfway done, but that was in my head. I got to know what's in there. I got to know what's in there. And, you know, we finally got to it, but I know that feeling like, damn, what could have been there?
That's the thrill of the hunt. That's the thrill of the hunt. And it might be nothing, but it's going to be fun to figure it out, you know?
Yeah.
Fingers get dirty, you know, it's crazy.
Since you've mentioned your kids, do your kids get into this at all? Do they go into the garage and be like, see what they can find? Or are they into comics at all?
Absolutely not. Occasionally I see a kid sliding through the bins, or they're on racks and they're aisles. We made aisles, so I'll see a kid shoot through and I'm like, you better be careful with dad's comics. So my kids read like Dog Man, and they do read some of the kitty comics. But they're 9 and 7, so it's still not quite there for them yet. And it's like, I need to read the book before you read the book, because I can't expose you to crazy stuff.
Yeah.
You know? So no, they're not quite there yet. They also don't appreciate the delicate nature that is comics. But my boy, he likes to come in here and he looks at the wall and he tries to identify the heroes that he knows. And that's kind of where it starts. You know what I'm saying? It starts with, he knows the difference between Iron Man and Spider-Man. And he drew a picture of me the other day with a cape with a D on the back for Dad. And he was like, Dad, I put the Spider-Man logo on your shirt though. And I was like, my man, you know, so it's cool. It's cool. But hopefully one of them will get into comics. I've written comics into my will. So if I
say, Pat,
if I go away, it's written in there that they divide the comics or sell the comics and divide the cash. Either way, that's in my will.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, I think that's kind of the thought. Like we have the kids we talked about. Like the hope is one of the 3, or JP case maybe one of the 4, does come back and gets into it. You know, and it becomes kind of like a legacy kind of thing, right? I pass it on down. Otherwise, if they're not into it, it's sell it, and me and the wife will go on a nice vacation at some point. So.
A heck of a vacation. So I tell my wife, you know, anything in the garage, dump it. That's the 100K collection. Like I've stripped a lot of great books out of it. Get rid of it, right?
Right.
Sugar box. You treat those with respect, right? Yep. And so the books in here are in order from really nice to maybe not so nice, right? The graded books, that is. So she knows where to really focus her attention, you know. But I've dedicated or committed to her that I will not leave this earth with 100,000 comics.
Yeah, that's going to be my question. Like, is the end goal there to consolidate down to a certain number, or what do you
I may become a dealer at some point.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I started selling a lot more books on Whatnot and other platforms to like move through some of the books and to generate revenue for me buying other books. At some point, when I retire, if I'm still, you know, able, I may become a dealer, and I won't own a comic shop, but maybe I'll deal out of my garage. Mm-hmm. You know, have people, because I do Garage Con, which is a con that I do at my house. It's copywritten Garage Con because it's a con in the garage. Nice. Maybe it'll be me dealing comics out of the garage at some point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a nice retirement project.
You see what I'm saying? I have a plan.
Always a plan. I mean, it seems like you're branching off from one to the other, which is awesome. Like, you have so many choices in a hobby. It isn't the career, it's the hobby that is branched into all these different facets. That I think that's really neat. It's like being, you know, you could be a doctor and then you also play professional football, you know,
and I'm having fun.
Yeah. Like Bo Jackson, he played all the sports, right? And he did them all really well. I mean, it's just crazy.
Why? Because he can.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
And it's about having fun, man. I mean, you know, this hobby has so many facets to it. You know what I'm saying? There's so many ways to enjoy it. You just have to find the ways that you enjoy and then do that. And if you don't have fun with that, pivot to another thing. Right now, I'm on a mission to read at least one comic per day, because I kind of got away from reading.
Start that? Was that January or February? Because you said
I started it this month.
Okay, February.
Started this month, and so far I've already read 10 comics. You know, at points I am more reader than buyer, right? And with this new job that I've taken on, I've been just so busy that I have to do the absolute things that have to be done. You know what I'm saying? Like work, homework with my kids, sports activities, create a couple of videos for the channel. That's it. That's all I had time for. And I realized I wasn't having as much fun, you know? So I've started to carve out time to just read a comic and just escape from some other stuff, you know? And that's working.
In that reading, is it Spider-Man still that is your top dog, or
everything, brother? So when I read, I read everything. Say that again.
Lobo 1 through 4.
There you go. There you go. I read everything. So, you know, part of it is the viewers of the channel make me aware of things that they're reading. I'm like, well, I'm gonna go read that so I can know what you're talking about, right? Like part of me buying DC and reading more DC is because I have a viewership that reads DC and I want to know what the heck they're talking about. So I go and read it. And I can't help you be smart about the hobby if I'm being ignorant to parts of the hobby. You know what I'm saying? Right. So even though I'm a Marvel guy, I needed to start reading DC. So I did. And I'm like, oh, there's actually some really like Dark Side War. One of my favorite reads, right? 3 Jokers. One of my favorite reads. Like there's a couple of story arcs that I really enjoy. But right now, I just recently read Cobra Commander, Duke, the original X-Men, Legends, and Blade. Those are all new books. And then I reread Blue Marvel 1 because it's been a while since I've read that. But I'll oftentimes, at one point when I was finishing up my run for Amazing Spider-Man, I started reading Amazing Spider-Man issue #1 and just started reading through, right? And I'll start to just read some Green Lantern books or some Superman books or whatever it is, whatever's going on. There are things that influence my back wall. There's things that influence what it is that I'm reading.
And that's mostly what I collect has been the covers, the artists, and whatnot. And I told Rohan one of my goals this year was to read more.
Yep.
And I probably read one. I try to start reading Exo Man of War. I had the first 4 or 5 issues of that, and then I heard that, you know, it was greatly written. I wasn't too much into that. I tried Miracle Man 1 to 4, 1 to 5, maybe it was. Got pretty far into it. Crow.
Which Miracle Man?
The original Miracle Man from what's his name?
With the MM on his chest.
MM on his chest, yeah.
Yeah, that's not too bad. That's not too bad. It's not.
It's pretty well written. I just finished The Crow 1 through 4.
I've never read that.
I'm gonna try Watchmen next. I have the graphic novel for Watchmen.
Yeah, so. I've never read that either. I've never read Watchmen.
I've heard a lot about that. I don't know, Rohan, have you read Watchmen or you know?
No, no, I'm definitely not. Most of the reading I've done is almost strictly Marvel, and then I would say Batman, Superman.
Yeah. But you know, the reading is just part of it, man. I think, and I always say this, I think we need all types of people in the hobby. We need speculators, we need investors, we need readers, we need cover hunters, we need, you know, all kinds of people in the hobby for the hobby to survive. We shouldn't poo-poo anyone that has an interest in the hobby. We shouldn't poo-poo them because what they do doesn't align to what we do, you know?
Yeah, and then that also allows you to sell 100,000 comics, right? Because you gotta fit all with 100. There's all the different genres out there, so you gotta.
There's a lot of genres, man, and there's people that don't like superheroes. I love spandex. There's people that love more cartoon stuff. Whatever you enjoy, do it, right? As long as you are in comics, we have no problems. That's just the way that's how I view it, you know?
No, I agree.
Yeah.
The writer for Miracle Man was Alan Moore. So again, he's a well-known writer, and
Alan Moore has done a lot of writing for DC, a lot of DC stuff, you know. But yeah, it's just one of my favorite story arcs. I like Weapon X. featuring Wolverine, because it gave this great backstory of Wolverine. Blue Marvel is another one of the reads that I enjoy for personal reasons. That story kind of resonated with me. Dark Side War, thoroughly enjoyed Dark Side War as a DC book. Three Jokers, love that one. And I happened to read Dark Side War at the same time Three Jokers was coming out, and I didn't know they were kind of connected, you know.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, that was a nice little surprise. Death in the Family, another great read, except for that last issue. I didn't really enjoy that one so much. So it's like a throwaway. He was already dead at that point. I was like, who cares? You know? But there's a lot of really great stories out there, you know.
But they seem to be most of the darker stories, though. It seem to be the ones that really hit hard for whatever reason. I mean, they're not the campy ones. You know, you can read the 60s AMS or Amazing Spider-Man, and yeah, they're funny little quips and whatnot. But those, the Dark Knight, Death in the Family, you know, those are gripping stories from what I understand.
There's also some wonderful Amazing Spider-Man stories that really resonated with me that speak about morality and responsibility and sacrificing for one's family. That really resonated with me as well. You know, I think it's Amazing Spider-Man, I think it's 133, 135, where he's trapped under this machinery.
Oh yeah.
And he's like, I got to get back to Aunt May. You know, Aunt May needs her medicine, right? And so you have these wonderful moral lessons that are built into there that I enjoy. But yeah, I mean, you know, you could be right that there's some of that darker stuff that sticks with you, maybe a little bit more so than the happy stuff. But it's also a blend for people, because different things resonate with different folks. I'm also a big horror fan, so that might be why I like the dark stuff. I don't know, you know.
Yeah.
So
I was a big Punisher fan, and I think that's why some of my takes later on in my collecting in the 90s became more darker stuff. So
could be, yeah.
You evolve. That's what happens.
And that's why I ended up going into DC, to that very point about evolving. And it's also important to give people the ability to grow, right? Not being so closed off that you prevent yourself from growing, but then also giving people the latitude to grow, like a cover hunter that decides that he's going to start reading comics. Don't poo-poo him because he's a cover hunter, because you never know. He might become a reader, right? Just embrace it for what it is, right? So, yeah.
Or someone might become a Lobo fan. You never know, right, Rohan? It might happen.
So just we're not going to get into it.
It's come up twice. It's come up twice.
JP and I have this like ongoing just like battle of like, he loves Lobo, I don't like Lobo, but we don't need to get into it.
Oh, that Lobo. I thought you were thinking about the black cowboy named Lobo that came out in the 60s.
No. I found that one in the antique store for $4. No. This clown-looking one here that we fight about.
Yeah.
The other Lobo was actually not a bad read. The cowboy logo. That was a interesting read. I read that one. So yeah,
we just had that on our feed today with our we have a group of guys that back and forth on IG, and someone showed Lobo #2, which I probably think is hard to find. Probably hard to find the #1, because those books back then, they were just not printed very often. Very many of them.
And a lot of them were actually returned to the publisher once they realized that Lobo was black in issue 1. They were like, hey, this issue 2, we don't want that. Can you take that back? You know, there was a rumor once upon a time that there was an issue 3 that had actually been done. I think that was a disproven rumor, but that was one I was kind of excited about. I was like, man, can I get an issue 3? That'd be dope. But I have 1 and 2, and I saw another one that I was going to buy. I was actually hunting in Michigan. I was visiting family, and I was in Michigan. There was one on the wall, and I decided not to buy it, and then called the shop like the next day, and it had already sold. So I kicked myself over not buying the second copy, you know.
Well, I ran into that at an antique store last year, and it was $4.
Yeah.
It was probably a 4.0, and I knew it from the cover, right?
It's cool.
And I'm like, oh yeah. I grabbed it. My heart was pounding because I knew I just got a deal on it.
It's a cool book, cool piece of history. Cool piece of history. It's a cool cover, that mustard and the red. I mean, it's a pretty cover, man. You know, even though I'm not a cover guy, that, you know, certain covers that you can still picture in your head, you know?
Yeah, definitely. No, that's why I remembered it, because it was the way when I saw it there, I was like, oh, that's it. I can't believe it's here.
Yeah. So, you never know. You never know where you're going to find the gems.
Yeah,
that's right.
Reggie, this has been excellent. Really appreciate you coming on. You know, we always ask people to tell people where they can find you as we close out here. So you give your rundown here.
Yeah, if you search anywhere for Regie Collects, you'll find me.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think we all know where to find it. We just wanted to put that out there.
It's pretty simple. But no, I appreciate you guys having me on the show and working with my schedule. But I've enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for having Doug and Scott on and engaging.
We loved having them on. They were awesome.
They're both good guys. You know what I'm saying? And that's a great thing about this community. So I could say that I could insert any number of names, right? But no, I appreciate you all having me on, and I've enjoyed the conversation. So thank you for that.
Right
no,
on.
I want to say 2 years ago when I got back into it and started listening to you, I didn't think 2 years later I'd be having you on the show talking to you. So I think that's awesome. So I do appreciate you being on here.
Dreams come true, brother.
They do. They certainly did. Hey, I'm cool with it, man. That's why we're the non-geek, non-nerds here, right? We got lucky here, but no, I appreciate it. Like we always say, like, comment, subscribe. You can find Regie anywhere. Look for us.
Search deeper for us.
Search them long boxes that are in the back of that antique store. And
that's where you'll find us. Yes.
So. But no, thanks to all watching, and we'll catch you on the next unboxing, interview, or show-off show. Thanks again. Peace out.
Later, guys.